Humble Bundle is a service that gives you a bunch of games each month for a subscription fee of about $12. If you get this subscription, you also have access to the Humble Trove, a place where you can download DRM-free games onto your computer for free. There are actually a lot of great games here, like Amnesia, Limbo, Super Meat Boy. You've even got The Sexy Brutale, Soma, and Getting Over It. But the majority of the games found in the Trove are small indie games that not many people have heard of. So I'm going to be taking a look at these games in the Trove and seeing if any of them are any good. Lyric Sonata was a game I was actually kind of looking forward to because it seemed to have such an interesting concept. Basically, you control a black line and guide it into musical notes and across different environments to further progress into the game. This sounds like a good concept in theory, but controlling the line felt a little wonky and made it pretty much impossible to play notes in a way that made a cohesive song or tune. So whenever you were in a section with musical notes, you'd likely just end up doing this. There were also environments that were actually kind of interesting, especially this one where they have a dude with his penis hanging out. The island bit looked extremely wonky though. You could see the water kind of going into the side of the mountain and your line would often go into the ground. Though I can't tell if that was intentional or not. It just made me feel like the game was missing a ton of polish. Especially if the game's goal was to immerse the player into the environment. I had to stop playing because I got to the edge of the island level and had no idea where to go next. If there is anything else in the game, I doubt I'm missing out on much except for more. In conclusion, I appreciate the effort to be creative and unique, but for me at least this game was more confusing and boring than artistic and calming. Oh Dear is a game where you have to drive to Grandma's house for the holidays. But along the way, you will encounter lines of deer in the road that wish only to prevent you from reaching your dear old granny. So you've got no choice but to freaking annihilate every deer in sight! Okay, legit though, this is actually a pretty fun little game. It's simple yet so satisfying, smooth, and fast-paced. It's backed up by some pretty groovy tunes and sound effects. And if you get good enough to make it to Grandma's house, you can hop over to survival mode and see just how long you can last on the twisting roads flooded with deer. Once you start picking up the speed, you gotta start drifting. And that's where the game gets real spicy.
18 naked cowboys in the showers at Ram Ranch.
This game is a flipping masterpiece. Look at that frog. Look at that guy's hair. The hair alone makes this game worth checking out. So basically, Cut and Run is a game where you begin each level with a rather short sword. Your goal is to cut objects found in these levels in half, but some of these objects are too big to cut with your short sword. Luckily, your blade was created by your dad, who accidentally turned himself into a frog. Your dad gave the sword the ability to grow with every slice. Needless to say, this allows your sword to grow to ridiculous lengths. Your stats start out pretty shite. You run extremely slow, it takes you 5 years to swing your sword, and it takes a while to get your sword big. Although the game fixes this problem by rewarding the player with coins as they cut different items. Now you might be wondering why we're going around cutting everyone's stuff up, and you'll be happy to find out that we do have a goal in mind here. A meteor is heading straight for the city you live in, but if you can get your sword big enough, you'll be able to cut the meteor in half before it lands and destroys the city. The game has a pretty good soundtrack too, along with some pretty funny moments. And the creativity and diversity in these levels is so good. There's a level where you gotta cut trash on the beach. There's a level where you gotta cut a gas station in half. There's even a level where you gotta cut lemons that rain from the sky. Oh, look at that fucking lemon! Oh my god! Look at the lemon! I have a big sword!
You cut the lemon!
There was a game-breaking glitch I ran into where I fell below the map and had to restart, but other than that, this game was great.
Big head throbbing cocks.
I don't really have much to say about Hitchhiker because it didn't give me much to work with. It seems to be a demo or a first episode for a full game, but just going off of what is offered in the Trove at the moment, I can say that Hitchhiker wasn't really a bad game. It just needed a lot of polish. Normally I can forgive a few textures popping in and low resolution graphics, but with a game like this I feel like it matters a bit more for immersion. And this game made those things very, very apparent. As soon as the game started, I looked into the rear view mirror to see that the reflections looked like they were in 144p and super pixelated. The man you sit next to never moves his mouth.
Not the talkative type, eh? That's okay.
And the frame rate tends to drop quite a bit for seemingly no reason. Hitchhiker does the generic indie thing where it tries to be philosophical and mysterious. And to be honest, I'm pretty okay with that. It kept things interesting and had me wondering about what was actually going on in the game. All in all, I'd say I'm definitely curious to see the future of how this game will play out.
Wanted to be sucked.
Drakenoid is a very simple game. There are two sections of the field. When the ball is in the lower portion, time is slow and you can draw a line for the ball to bounce off of. When the ball is in the top portion, the ball travels at the speed of light and returns to the lower part almost immediately. At first, this game is pretty boring and repetitive, but eventually you gather enough money to purchase upgrades and abilities that give more variety to the game. You can get a power boost, an auto-aim ability, an ability that helps you predict where the ball will go after it hits your paddle, and much more. These abilities really help the game and prevent it from being monotonous, at least for the most part. While this game is obviously very well made and is fun and addicting for a decent amount of time, it really feels like a mobile game. And by that, I just mean it gets very repetitive after about an hour or two. I believe with a bit more content and a slammin' synth soundtrack, this game could be something really, really amazing. But for now, I'd say it's pretty alright.
18 naked cowboys wanted to be fucked.
Gunmetal Arcadia 0 is another pretty alright game. It's got obvious inspiration from classic NES titles, especially Castlevania. Gunmetal Arcadia goes a bit further than most other NES-inspired indie games in terms of capturing the nostalgic feel of the traditional games with the CRT options for your screen. You can customize the CRT to an insane extent with tons of options just for the CRT display setting. The game itself is pretty good as well. It even felt a bit similar to Shovel Knight a couple of times, which is a very big compliment. The story was pretty uninteresting, for me at least, but that didn't seem to be the main focus of the game at all. Throughout the levels, you'll run into different shops that provide you with different items, weapons, and passive upgrades. Though I feel like some of these upgrades should have already been a part of your character to begin with, like the ability to attack vertically. Gunmetal Arcadia feels unique in comparison to modern indies, despite it being pretty much just classic Castlevania with much better controls and more depth. Out of all these games I played from the Humble Bundle Trove, I'd have to say without a doubt that my favorite was Cut and Run. Most of the other games were pretty fun experiences, but I don't think I had nearly as much fun with any of them in comparison to Cut and Run. The Trove still has a lot of games that I haven't even touched yet, but if you're subscribed to Humble Bundle, I definitely recommend checking out the Trove if you don't usually check it out. There are a lot of intriguing ideas and hidden gems in there.
Come on, I'm so close.
Maximum lemon!
I need one more. What the fuck? Fucking 69 lemons.